toy collectors, welcome to another super exciting, outrageous toy review. Today, I'm taking a look at the contents of this cardboard box. One of my former coworkers several years ago gave me a whole bunch of boxes of toys from her attic that belonged to her kids that were just a little bit older than me. She was cleaning up after she retired, and I've done videos on a bunch of items from that series, and this box just kind of got lost in the shuffle. I didn't have a burning desire to go through it, I guess because it wasn't necessarily a toy line that I thought was super popular. But today, I really wanted to check it out. So, I'm going to just dump this out and we'll go through it. So these are part of the LJN Dungeons & Dragons toy line. LJN, the makers of the Thundercats toys and lots of terrible video games, made Dungeons & Dragons toys in the 80s. These toys ranged from articulated action figures to kind of hunks of plastic and bendy toys. It was a strange mix of play patterns, but this was the best we had back then. And the odd thing was that the game Dungeons & Dragons was promoted by a cartoon show, and it barely tied in with the toy line that also promoted Dungeons & Dragons. First up, we've got the Bugbear. This is a classic Dungeons & Dragons bad guy. It's one solid hunk of plastic. You can see he's armed with a club, which almost looks misshapen. I don't know if this one was warped from being in a box for decades, or if it kind of was always shaped that way. And he's got a little bit of armor on, some plates on his chest and on his sleeves and things like that. Kind of an interesting figure, but also really pretty ugly. Here we've got the Troglodyte. This is like a crazy lizard man guy. He seems to be armed with an axe and a scimitar or some sort of curved blade sword. Again, one big piece of rubber with a couple different paint apps here. He's got sort of yellow on his fin and a little bit of detail on his weapons. It's not a good paint scheme. The paint mask or paint work on these look like a craft done by a kid. It's funny that now I don't really have much of a desire to collect or own these Advanced Dungeons & Dragons toys, but as a kid, I would have been really into them because I played D&D quite a bit, but I pretty much missed the window. These came out when I was really little, before I played D&D. I did watch the D&D cartoon, but I was never able to connect the toys with the time period in which I played the game. Here we've got a Steadfast Man-at-Arms. Most of the human characters that I remember from the AD&D line were articulated figures. Like, I actually picked up a couple of the Wizards and Warduke and some of those guys over the years as a kid at flea markets and things like that. And those guys were all, like, actual action figures that even had action features built into some of them. But this guy's just a brick of rubber, and he does actually probably have more paintwork than most of these figures, but still doesn't look great. I think at a smaller scale, this level of paint job would have been more passable. This guy's got a shield on his back and a crossbow in his arms. Here we've got the Minotaur. This one actually, I think, is one of the better looking monsters as far as having a decent sculpt and a fair amount of paintwork that doesn't look too bad. He's kind of wearing a blue toga tunic type thing. He's got a black belt. He's got a giant axe and some cool bracers on his hands. They did paint in a little bit of extra details with things like his fingernails and his hooves. So I feel like he's one of the better guys from this rubber monster line. Next up, I've got the Umber Hulk. A classic Dungeons & Dragons bad guy. Probably one of the figures I would want to keep the most out of this batch for my personal collection, just because the Umber Hulk is such a cool character. But unfortunately, this one's broken. He actually should have, like, mandibles that jut out from the front of his face, and those are broken off. You can kind of tell when you look at him that there are spots where, like, posts are broken off inside his face, and that kind of stinks. So, again, there's not a lot of interest personally for me in this set, but they are a cool piece of Dungeons & Dragons history. Here we've got the Terrible Troll. This big old goofy looking green monster with black hair and black fur around his feet. They did do a little bit of dry brushing to that hair, which picks out some of the details, and that's kind of nice. It would have been cool if they had dry brushed his whole body in like a slightly lighter green to pick up all the textures and the detail in that sculpt. I think that the people that worked on these put a lot of details in there, and most of it's just lost by the thick coat of glopped on paint that's been sloppily applied to these monsters. The last figure I have here is known as the North Lord. He seems like just a human barbarian action figure. The toy line was made for 4-inch action figures, which allowed these rubber monsters to be pretty big and imposing to them. There's a couple of odds and end accessories in the bottom of the box. I'm not even sure if this axe belongs to the North Lord or not, but this was everything that was in this collection, and I think it's kind of a neat slice of late 70s, early 80s retro toys. Thanks for watching this super exciting, outrageous toy review. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out my other videos.